Welcome to Nice and Blunt. I'm Adam Riancho, and these are my running back rankings for week 1. Given it's the beginning of the year and you drafted players high, usually you kind of know who's in your starting lineup or not. So especially at the top of these rankings, the strategy should kind of be obvious. If you're heavily committed to a player, odds are you're going to start him. So with that in mind, let's get it going. In the top tier, I think the top 4 names are pretty obvious. I have Saquon Barkley versus the Cowboys this week as my number 1 player. Last year, interestingly, he only averaged 12.4 points per game in his 2 matchups against Dallas, but he also scored no touchdowns in those matchups. I expect that to change. The Cowboys got rid of Micah Parsons. They did bring in Kenny Clark. Maybe that does help the run defense, but overall, I expect a blowout win for the Eagles in their home opener, and the Cowboys are not going to stand a chance. Saquon is going to go off. He's my running back 1 this week. And at number 2, another player who's a lock in your lineup, I have Christian McCaffrey going on the road at Seattle. The main concern with McCaffrey is his injury risk. Will he be like last year and come off the field? But if it's like 2 years ago, then you're probably getting the RB1 in fantasy. So start him if you got him. There's no way you're benching him. What is interesting about CMC is last year when he was active in only 4 games, he did not score a single touchdown. Meanwhile, 2 years ago in 2023, he scored 21 touchdowns in 16 games. So something's going to give. Odds are those touchdowns come back to him, and given the injuries at receiver in the Niners offense, you know McCaffrey is going to be an elite start as long as he remains on the field. So McCaffrey is my RB2, and at number 3, I'm rolling with Bijan Robinson versus Tampa Bay. I'm a little worried about the right tackle situation, but not enough to fade him. You know his volume is going to be elite this year, and also he contributes heavily in the passing game. If we look at his 4 career games versus Tampa Bay, there is the infamous 1-touch game when he was a rookie and he had a migraine. But if we look at the last 3, he is averaging only 15.4 points per game. He scored 2 touchdowns in those 3 games, and he also relies mostly on heavy receiving volume. So I would expect that to continue. Plenty of targets are going towards Bijan this year. He's a lock in your lineup. This week, I have him at number 3. At number 4, I have Jahmyr Gibbs at the Green Bay Packers. And the only question mark with Gibbs at the moment is what will his split be with Dave Montgomery this year? We're expecting it to lean more heavily in his favor. That's what the hype has been this offseason. But it is worth noting, in 4 career games versus the Packers, Gibbs has only averaged 11.8 points per game. The touch split has actually been very relevant with Montgomery, and perhaps he gets vultured on the goal line. Perhaps he is in still a relative timeshare with Dave Montgomery. So that's why I have him at the bottom of this tier. He has the highest upside of any player. When Montgomery was off the field, he averaged 29 points per game last year. But with Montgomery, he was more like the RB8 on a points per game basis. So that's why I can't put him at the top. However, once we see what the touch split is, perhaps I will be ranking him at RB1 next week. But maybe, just maybe, he does fall down a few spots. Maybe Montgomery is more involved than we expect. Moving on, though, I think we are exiting the elite top tier. Odds are you didn't draft these guys in the first round, and even if you did, I think in week 1, maybe there are some concerns why they should not be ranked in the top 5. But at number 5, I'm actually going with Jonathan Taylor of the Indianapolis Colts versus the Dolphins. I expect this to be one of the best games on offense for the Colts all year long. The Dolphins defense is trash, and even though they're a little bit better against the run than the pass, I expect Jonathan Taylor to get a heavy workload. The Colts are desperate, especially Shane Steichen. I think he's coaching for his job this year. And with Daniel Jones, they can't feel super confident that they're going to win more than 7 games at best this year. So I think the Colts and the Dolphins are going to be bottom 5 teams this year. However, in this game, I think both offenses play well, and I do expect them to lean very heavily on Jonathan Taylor. If we look at his last 5 games of the 2024 season, he was averaging 29 touches per game for 149 yards per game, only 1 catch per game, but he also scored 7 touchdowns in those final 5 weeks. So I would expect the volume to kind of be there. He's fully healthy, and Jonathan Taylor is a stud, can definitely overwhelm an opposing defense with a shit ton of touches. So I see a lot of volume for Taylor this week. I think the Colts will play well. I have Taylor as my RB5. At number 6, I'm rolling with Bucky Irving at the Falcons. Rachaad White is questionable. I think the hype on Sean Tucker may have gone a little too far. And with Rachaad White probably off the field, there's a lot of targets headed for Bucky Irving. So with wide receiver depth concerns in the Bucs offense, other than Igbuka and Evans, there's not that many players available to catch passes. I would expect the usage rate to be the highest of Bucky's career in this matchup. So I think he's a clear lock in the top 10. And this week, I think he has supreme upside. He could drop 25 fantasy points this week. Wouldn't shock me at all. So I love Bucky Irving. He's a stud, one of my favorite players to root for. And I think this week, he's the RB6. At number 7, I got Chase Brown at Cleveland. And all year long, he's locked into top 10 production at the position. As long as he's healthy, the volume will be there, especially in the passing game. I view him as the new Austin Ekeler. He could literally eclipse 85, 90 receptions on the season if he stays healthy. So expect at least 5 catches coming for Chase Brown. In his last game as the starter versus the Browns last year, he only scored 12.4 points. However, he had 21 touches, 3 catches, 109 total yards. He did not score a touchdown. So if you do get the touchdown and the same stat line, you're looking at 18 fantasy points. I'm definitely trusting Chase Brown as a top 10 play week 1. At number 8, I have Josh Jacobs versus Detroit, and the Lions matchup was actually one of the most difficult last season in the NFL. They ranked bottom 5 in terms of fantasy points per game allowed to the position. However, one player that did struggle to stop was Josh Jacobs last year. He averaged 5.2 yards per carry in his 2 games versus the Lions. And in one of those matchups, the last one he played in at Detroit, Jacobs did score 3 touchdowns in that game. So he did average 18.2 points per game against the Lions in 2 matchups last year. It is touchdown dependent, but Jacobs can always score multiple touchdowns in any given game. Given the injuries to Jaden Reed, Romeo Doubs a bit up in the air, I expect them to lean on their studs on offense. Matthew Golden and Josh Jacobs are going to get a lot of volume in this matchup. I'm definitely starting Jacobs. He's a top 10 play pretty much every week. At number 9, I'm going to roll with James Cook versus the Baltimore Ravens. Ravens matchup is not ideal, but the Ravens secondary is a nightmare this year. That's going to be a very bad matchup to chase after. So I do expect the Buffalo Bills to lean on the run game a little bit extra in this game. Expect a shootout. Ravens-Bills on Sunday night is going to be a 40-point game on both sides of the ball. And I do expect James Cook's usage on the goal line to continue. He signed that contract extension, and I think he's good to go. I would expect a touchdown for James Cook, and potentially a couple of them. There's probably going to be a lot of yardage and points scored by both teams. So I do like James Cook as a top 10 play this week. I think in this matchup, he has the elite upside we would be chasing. At number 10, I am still kind of in panic mode on DeVon Achane. He's questionable with that soft tissue injury, and you do want to monitor his status in practice throughout the week. But assuming he starts, I think based on where you drafted him, you have to start him. He is a top 10 play when healthy, and as long as Tua is on the field, then you definitely trust this offense a little bit more. So I'm still worried about Achane. I could see him burn you. I'm also not fully sure what to expect from Ollie Gordon. I think he could be a sneaky touchdown vulture this season, but especially in the passing game, DeVon Achane could have 7 targets in this matchup, and the Colts don't scare you that much. They're basically middle of the pack last year at stopping the running backs in fantasy. So I'm not going to completely panic, but to pretend like I'm hyper confident in Achane with a questionable designation is definitely not ideal. So I can't put him at the top of this tier, but he is in must start consideration. There's no way if you drafted Achane in the 2nd round, or maybe even the 1st, that you're benching him, especially in full PPR. I would expect a high output. So high upside, as always. Achane is in the top 10, but I would like to see him play. I'm kind of worried that his volume comes down with a questionable tag for this matchup. At number 11, though, I have Kenneth Walker versus San Francisco, and I think he's going to be lights out in this game. I kind of wanted to rank him even higher than Josh Jacobs, but at number 11 is where I'm going to settle. The Niners matchup was top 10 against the running back position. They gave up over 22 fantasy points per game, and on paper, it is a good spot. The defense, I don't think is going to be much better than last year, but with Robert Saleh as the new defensive coordinator, perhaps maybe it's not the best matchup like it was last year. So I'm a little concerned about that, but overall, the main risk factor with Walker is his injury concerns. He's struggled to stay healthy throughout his career, but week 1, he's as healthy as he's going to be all season. So I'm definitely starting him. I think he could have 8 targets in this game. Last year in week 6, when he played a home game versus the Niners, that's what he offered: 14 carries and 8 targets. He had 8 catches. And I think in full PPR, just like DeVon Achane, Kenneth Walker does get a massive upgrade in those scoring settings. So I love Kenneth Walker this week. I think he's a must start. I think he will be a stud as long as he remains healthy. He has top 10 potential any single week. So trust him for sure. I think he does score a touchdown. I think he carries them to victory. I think he plays lights out against the Niners at home. At number 12, though, you may have been wondering, where is Derrick Henry in these rankings? And even though the Bills matchup is going to lead to a lot of points from both sides of the ball, I do believe Derrick Henry is going to be eased in, as he historically has been the last 4 years, in week 1. If we look at the last 4 career season openers for Derrick Henry, these are his averages. An average of 17.7 touches per game, only 80 yards per game, 1.2 catches per game, and only 1 touchdown in the last 4 years in week 1. That's an average of just 10.2 fantasy points per game. If we look at his production last year against the Chiefs in week 1, without a touchdown, he would have burned you. He only had 13 carries for 46 yards and a touchdown in that game. So if it's going to resemble last season, I would definitely be concerned. I think that is a slight red flag, but I would trust that the touchdown is going to hit for Derrick Henry. Historically, he's actually played very well, specifically against the Buffalo Bills. So I think he'll be fine, but I don't think his volume will be the highest we're going to see all year. And I would be a little concerned that they do mix in Justice Hill and potentially Keaton Mitchell a little bit more. He has been a little bit of a slow starter over the last 4 seasons in week 1. So that's why I have him at the bottom of this tier. At RB12, he is a must start. At 31 years old, expect a slightly diminished volume for Derrick Henry this week. It's going to bounce back very quickly. And I'm also not telling you to bench him. Just pump the brakes a little bit. Don't expect a top 5 finish from Derrick Henry in week 1. Moving forward, though, I think we are dropping down a tier. This is the RB2 territory, and you are starting these players no matter what. If a player ranks top 20, I want them in my lineup. Even at the flex spot, I think they probably have the tiebreaker over any wide receiver that you would consider in the flex. So at number 13, I have James Conner at New Orleans. And the main concern with Conner this year is his age. He's over 30 years old and he usually misses time. But in week 1, he's fully healthy. I have no concerns about Trey Benson vulturing touches. Last year, he was a top 15 running back in points per game. I would expect that to continue, especially against a bottom 5 team like the Saints. I think the Cardinals are going to win and have good game script. They will run the ball a little extra in the second half. So I love James Conner. He's a must start. I think he has top 10 upside this week at RB13. I think you need him in your lineup. At number 14, I have Ashton Jeanty at New England, and the hype is legit, but in his pro debut, I'm not going to expect his best game of the season. So I think there could be some growing pains. I'm still a little bit concerned about the Raiders offensive line, and I also think Mike Vrabel will coach up the defense in the Patriots home opener. I do think they're going to play pretty well. So I could easily see a top 10 finish from Jeanty, but this week I'm going to just rank him at number 14. I would like to see this new look Raiders offense before I fully endorse Jeanty as a top 5 option. So maybe you think I'm ranking him too low, but at 14, I am guaranteeing you he's a good start this week. I don't think I would be panicked on Jeanty, but I just don't expect his best game of the season. So that's why I only have him at number 14. I'm a little concerned the touchdowns don't hit for the Raiders in this one, and I'm also a little concerned that the efficiency is not going to be there. I'm just a little bit reluctant to fully endorse Jeanty as that elite option overall in the top 10. But I could definitely be wrong. I get it if you think I'm too low. I'm just willing to play it a bit more conservative with the rookie in his first ever game action in the NFL. And same goes for TreVeyon Henderson. As much as I want to believe the hype in his rookie debut, maybe he has a slow start, but Rhamondre Stevenson is questionable with an undisclosed injury. There's a chance he does not play. And if that happens, I'd probably vault up TreVeyon, perhaps above James Conner, and Derrick Henry. But against the Raiders, it's a very good matchup. I think they're going to struggle to stop him, and his speed will be on display. I think TreVeyon is a lock to score a touchdown. There's a chance he absolutely dominates in this home opener for the Patriots. So they want their fan base energized. I think their new toy, the best player on the field, TreVeyon, will look tremendous. And I also think there's a chance he actually outperforms Jeanty in week 1. So I think both the rookies are must starts in the top 15. I don't think you can bench any of these players in your lineup. Next up at number 16, I get it if you want to rank Kyren Williams higher. However, last year, Houston was the 4th toughest matchup for opposing running backs. It's an extremely difficult spot against an elite defense. And so far, Stafford and the offensive line didn't get a ton of reps together in practice the last few weeks. And I'm just a little bit worried that the Rams start off a little sluggish overall. I'm also concerned that Davante Adams steals a lot of goal line usage away from Kyren Williams. So that's a big factor. And although he's still a must start in the top 20, I just think he's a middle of the pack RB2 against the Texans specifically. This matchup is the main concern, and I do think he deserves a downgrade. But I doubt you have 3 running backs on your team that I rank higher. So definitely start Kyren, just pump the brakes on the ceiling expectation. And then at number 17, I think Chuba Hubbard could absolutely dominate this week on the road at Jacksonville. The Jags defense was a top 2 matchup last year against the running back position. They gave up over 25 fantasy points per game to opposing running backs. And with a young wide receiver core trading away Adam Thielen, I would expect the Panthers to rely a little more heavily on the run early in the season. So I do think he's a very reliable start. I think all they want to do is just move the chains consistently, keep Bryce Young confident. And although I'm a bit worried about Rico Dowdle stealing valuable targets from Chuba Hubbard, based on the contract extension they gave him, I would still expect his overall volume to hover around 20 touches per game. So the floor is definitely a safe investment here. I would expect a touchdown for Chuba. I think he's a very safe start. And if he does crack the top 10 in points this week, it wouldn't be that shocking. The matchup is an absolute upgrade overall. The Jaguars didn't improve very much on defense this offseason. So a very safe high floor play. There is some elite ceiling here. The matchup is one you want to chase. Start Chuba Hubbard with confidence. At number 18, I got Alvin Kamara versus Arizona, and I might be ranking him 10 spots too low. Last year when healthy, he was a top 5 running back in points per game. However, the addition of Kellen Moore as the play caller does have me concerned just a little bit. Kellen Moore does not target the running back in the passing game anywhere near as much as Clint Kubiak did last year's offensive coordinator. So I would like to see what this offense looks like before I vault Kamara into the top 12. And there is some concern. The Cardinals defense made a lot of improvements this offseason, and there's a chance they really shut down the Saints offense. I'm not convinced that Spencer Rattler is going to move the ball very well. So I could see a major bust here from all of the Saints offensive weapons. It may get ugly very quickly in New Orleans. So at RB18, I still think you're starting him, but I think he's more of a floor play. I could easily see the Saints not score a single touchdown in this matchup. So good luck with Kamara, but I think from a floor standpoint, the volume should be there. And then at number 19, I also think the volume is going to carry Tony Pollard to a clear RB2 finish this week. Tyjae Spears is on IR, so he's going to miss at least 4 games, and no one else is relevant on the depth chart in Tennessee. So the usage might be elite this week. I could envision 20 plus carries and literally like 5 or 6 targets for Pollard. I think that's going to cover up all of the red flags, and the volume is going to keep Pollard in a clear must-start territory. I think he's a obvious top 20 running back this week, although I am a bit worried about the matchup. The Broncos have one of the best defenses in the NFL, and they are going up against a rookie quarterback at the end of the day. It's possible the Titans offense really struggles to move the ball, but I would expect if a touchdown is scored in Tennessee, it probably goes to the running back. I think Pollard has a very high floor in this game, so trust him. Expect to see him in the top 20 rankings until Tyjae gets back on the field. At number 20, I'm a bit concerned about Omarion Hampton, the rookie for the Chargers. on the road in Brazil against the Chiefs. I think this is going to be a very low-scoring game. And of all matchups last year, the Chiefs were the most difficult overall for opposing running backs last year. They only gave up an average of 13.2 points per game. Even the second toughest matchup was giving up over 15 points per game to the position. So the Chiefs know how to lock up opposing running backs. I definitely think they're going to focus on stopping Hampton, but even with some risk in regards to that matchup, Najee is questionable. I don't expect much usage from him at all. And I would expect, similar to Tony Pollard, at least 20 carries for Omarion Hampton. So the volume is also going to carry him. While I don't think the efficiency is going to be good for him against Kansas City, I do expect inevitably Hampton to wear down the defense. And in the second half, I do think he's going to pop at least one massive play. I think odds are Jim Harbaugh will rely on the run game enough to carry Hampton over the line and be a top 20 running back in fantasy this week. So I'm going to trust the volume. I trust the talent, but I think the matchup is a major concern. And if you told me Hampton really underperforms against the Chiefs this week, I wouldn't be that surprised. So he's moving down the rankings. I think he'll be much better after this week. If he lays an egg, I would absolutely be trying to buy low on Hampton. I would be trying to trade for him if the person that drafted him is hitting the panic button after a rough game. The matchup here is a nightmare. So that's why I'm ranking Hampton much lower than where I had him entering the season. He's going to crush as the season goes on, but in Brazil against the Chiefs, I'm a little worried, not going to lie. Number 21, entering the flex conversation, I do have Breece Hall versus the Steelers, and the Steelers matchup is a slightly legit concern. But overall, I think Breece Hall is going to be fine in terms of usage, but I am kind of worried about the Braelon Allen hype, and also the fact that Justin Fields' scramble ability is probably going to vulture some rushing touchdowns over the course of the season. So because of all the moving parts in the Jets offense, I'd rather wait and see before I fully endorse Breece Hall as a must start. I ranked him as a top 20 running back to start the year, but I didn't have him top 15, and I was kind of heavily fading him overall in terms of draft targets. So I just want to see what this Jets offense looks like. The backfield could be more of a touch split than we envisioned, and until I know for sure, until I know that Braelon Allen is not a complete vulture on the goal line, I will pump the brakes a little bit. I think Breece Hall in this spot is not the safest play overall, but in terms of flex plays, he's probably the highest upside you can find. I do trust him in the lineup to a certain degree. Given Pollard vaults into the top 20, that's why Breece Hall falls to 21. I just want to wait and see a little bit before I fully endorse Breece in your lineup. But at number 22, also in the high-end flex department, I have Dave Montgomery at Green Bay, and the hype all offseason was that Gibbs is going to be more involved and that Montgomery's touch split is going to diminish. But I'm not convinced that he disappears entirely. If you told me that his role in the goal line is the same this year, I wouldn't be shocked, and I would like to see it before I fully write off Montgomery in this offense. So there's a chance he puts up top 15 numbers this year. There's a chance Gibbs kind of lets you down, and it's possible we see close to like a 55-45 touch split in Detroit like we have in the past. So I still think he's a valuable asset. I think he's still kind of underrated, but to pretend like I'm fully confident that he sees the same volume as he has the last 2 years would be naive, and there is some concern that Montgomery's just not as involved as he has been in the past. So I'm probably going to start him, but more so as a flex option. If you have the depth to bench him, that's not the worst decision possible. I would like to see what this new look Lions offense is going to be with the new offensive coordinator. So last year, he was actually very consistent in this matchup. Last 2 games against Green Bay, he averaged 14 points per game. I think in terms of very high-end flex options, Montgomery, a player I would probably start with some confidence. Number 23, I got DeAndre Swift versus Minnesota. And the question I'm asking is, does anyone actually trust the Bears in week 1? I can't say that I do. As hyped as I am for their offensive output, I just don't think it's a safe investment. But I also know that Roschon Johnson has been banged up all training camp. Monungai, the 7th round rookie, I think is also not a threat at all week 1. So the volume is pretty much locked in for Swift. I just have no confidence that a running back actually scores a touchdown in Chicago this week. It's going to be a rough matchup against the Vikings, which were a bottom 3 matchup for all running backs last year. They only give up an average of 15.5 points per game last season. Their defense is pretty underrated, especially against stopping the run. So I am concerned. Swift last year in 2 games versus Minnesota only averaged 8.7 points per game, but the offensive line is much improved. The offense with Ben Johnson should be a lot better. And while there is a lot of risk here, the volume should be okay. I think he will carry you to a double-digit output this week. Swift is a high-end flex play this week and probably every week moving forward. He probably doesn't crack the top 20 too often. Until the bye weeks, I doubt I'm ranking Swift higher than RB20. Next up at 24 and 25, I have both of the Broncos running backs RJ Harvey and JK Dobbins here back-to-back versus the Titans. This Titans game could easily turn into a blowout. The Titans were a top 12 matchup for running backs last season, giving up over 22 fantasy points per game on average, and I do see a ton of upside for the Broncos backfield here, but I do not know for sure what the touch split is going to be between these two players, and I want to believe in RJ Harvey, but I also know that Sean Payton likes to incorporate multiple running backs. It will be a heavy time split between the two players. And I could also easily envision Dobbins have the edge on Harvey week 1. As the veteran, I could see Sean Payton make Harvey earn the job. And that's why I do think Dobbins might have higher upside in this matchup, especially when he's healthy. Dobbins has some elite potential. He's a really talented player, and it's just been injuries that have held him back throughout his career. But week 1, he's fully healthy. I expect probably a highest usage of the season going for Dobbins in week 1. But overall, I think both players are going to have a very good game, especially as the game goes on late in the fourth quarter. The Broncos are probably going to be winning by at least 2 touchdowns, and they will kill the clock. They're probably going to lean a little extra on the run game to close out the game. So good luck with the Broncos backfield, but this week I think in the top 25, you probably want them in your flex spot. But at 26, I'm actually really tempted to rank Travis Etienne much higher because the matchup is elite. He goes up against Carolina at home, and last year the Panthers were literally the best matchup on paper you could ask for against opposing running backs. They gave up 27.6 points per game on average. So Travis Etienne is poised to exploit that. I do believe they're going to give him a chance to prove himself. I think week 1, the job is his to lose, and he will have the opportunity to prove he can still handle a workhorse role. So I think week 1, he's the guy you want in the Jags backfield, but overall, we have not known exactly what to expect. It's still an ambiguous touch split between him, Tank Bigsby, and Bishal Tootin. But week 1, Tootin, I think, is relegated to clearly the number 3 option, not expecting much usage from him at all. And then with Bigsby, even though he was a better player in fantasy last year than Etienne, Bigsby does not catch passes whatsoever. So all of the PPR value is there for Etienne. I think they will use him on the goal line. And although I'm concerned about Bigsby vulturing him, that's why I only rank him at number 26. I think the matchup is so enticing. There is genuinely top 10 upside for Etienne against Carolina. So good luck starting him. I'm not dying to do it, but based on the matchup, I would like to be chasing the Panthers as a good spot, a clear upgrade against opposing running backs. At 27, I have Aaron Jones at Chicago. Week 1, I don't really fear Jordan Mason that much. There's rumors that it's a 1A, 1B situation, but Aaron Jones is a much better pass catcher, and I'm not convinced that JJ McCarthy is going to have this offense firing on all cylinders. So I think Kevin O'Connell will dial up some easy checkdowns. I do think Jones is the guy you want. And also the concern on Aaron Jones is that he's 30 years old and will break down over time. That's why people are mostly hyped on Jordan Mason. But in week 1, Aaron Jones is healthy, and as long as he doesn't lose all volume on the goal line, I do think he's the safer start in Minnesota. But I can't say definitively what to expect. That's why I think he's a low-end flex option. The Bears matchup was definitely a good one last year, though, and historically Jones does torch the Chicago Bears. So I do want to trust him, but Jordan Mason in the back of my mind is a red flag. If you told me that Jones loses more than half of the goal line touches this year, it wouldn't surprise me at all, and that's why I'd like to see what JJ McCarthy's offense looks like before I fully endorse either of the Vikings running backs. So at 27, definitely a start consideration, but a risky one for sure. At 28, the last player I'm really considering in my flex lineup would be Isiah Pacheco at the Chargers. And the Chargers last year were the 7th hardest matchup for opposing running backs in fantasy. They only gave up 18.6 points per game on average. And if this is not a workhorse role for Pacheco, then I think he could struggle to eclipse 10 points. I'm not convinced that the opportunity is going to be overwhelmingly in his favor. I still believe Kareem Hunt is a big factor in this backfield. And in Brazil, I'm kind of envisioning a pretty low scoring game in the first place. So there's a chance that Pacheco crushes. There's a chance that he looks elite. In this offense, there's always value, but I think he's very touchdown dependent this week, and I don't feel super safe betting on that to hit. So Pacheco, I would like to watch before I fully endorse. While I expect him to be the RB1 out the gate, it's not a guarantee. This matchup's not ideal, and last year he looked completely washed when he came back from the leg injury. So good luck. I hope it works out. If he does score the touchdown, I think he could put up 14 fantasy points, but without it, I think he'll struggle to go over 8. Moving forward, I think we're in the very low-end flex conversation. Unless you're in a deeper format or you're pretty desperate, you didn't draft a lot of depth at the position, I probably would not be starting these players with any level of confidence. But at 29, I got Jaylen Warren at the Jets, and he is listed as the week 1 starter. I'm going to trust that. Kaleb Johnson will factor in, but the rookie is not trusted in pass protection, and that's very relevant with the 41-year-old quarterback Aaron Rodgers. So Warren, I think, has a very decent floor in general. He's always like a safe bet for at least like 70 yards and 3 or 4 receptions. So 8 or 9 points would be my projection for Jaylen Warren. If you're just trying to avoid a bust, then start Jaylen Warren if all you need is 9 points in your lineup. However, last year, the touchdowns were a major problem for him. He only scored 1 touchdown on the season, and the Jets defense is a bottom 8 matchup. Last year, they only gave up 18.7 points per game. Just like the Chargers for Pacheco, this is not an ideal matchup to be chasing. So I'm not convinced that the Jets offense looks good in week 1. I'm really worried about the touchdown output in general, and I would be pumping the brakes on the Steelers running backs overall this season. I think there's pretty limited upside, and if you don't get a touchdown, it's going to be pretty difficult to go over 10 fantasy points. So he has a safe floor, but very capped upside in the Pittsburgh offense. At number 30, I have Dylan Sampson of the Browns versus the Bengals, and the matchup is pretty dope. The Bengals defense is one of the worst in the NFL, and at the moment, Quinshon Judkins has yet to sign his contract. So even if he does get it signed by Friday, he's not practiced with the team at all. And Dylan Sampson is definitely the guy you want to bet on in this backfield to start the year. But Jerome Ford does factor in. The Browns backfield is still not that exciting, and it's pretty touchdown dependent for any level of upside. I wouldn't be dying to trust Sampson in week 1. It's possible that Jerome Ford is still the guy you want, but there is very sneaky upside. I love this matchup overall this year. The Bengals defense is one you want to go up against. So maybe, just maybe, Dylan Sampson's much better than RB30 on the week, but we've never seen him play in an NFL game. I don't want to plant my flag on the rookie in week 1. The Browns offense is still kind of scary. So I want to see it first, but maybe next week I am ranking Sampson as a high-end flex play. There's a chance he pops and does put up 15 fantasy points this week against the Bengals. Next up at 31, I have Tyrone Tracy at Washington, and I would like to see this touch split between him and Scadaboo before I fully endorse him. But Scadaboo did miss valuable time in training camp. He is healthy for week 1, though, so to expect Tracy to fully dominate him is kind of naive, but I would trust Tracy more than Scadaboo early in the season. But the Commanders defense is not like the best matchup you could ask for. It's kind of average, but there is a chance that in division is a very low scoring game. And in general, I don't really trust the Giants offense to be scoring many touchdowns in the first place. So I kind of expect about 75 yards and at least 1 or 2 catches for Tracy, but to guarantee a touchdown is pretty naive. I wouldn't expect that. It's not a safe bet at all in the Giants backfield. So wait and see mode. I don't feel super confident in trusting him at this point in time. But at 32-33, I have the 2 Commanders running backs, Austin Ekeler and Ja'Cory Croskey-Merritt back to back here. And personally, I think the hype on JCM has gone a bit too far. At the end of the day, he's a 7th round rookie making his NFL debut. And historically, that's not something you want to bet on. So I would like to see it with Bill before I trust him. While he could score a touchdown, there's kind of a crowded backfield here. I don't know if Chris Rodriguez is completely irrelevant, and until I know for sure, I do think Austin Ekeler is the safer play in this backfield. Ekeler, I think, is going to catch a few passes here, have some good PPR value, and he's also kind of underrated in general. The main concern on Ekeler is his age. He's over 30 years old, and him breaking down over time. So although I love the upside for Bill later in the season, if Ekeler goes down, until that happens, I think it's more of a 50-50 split. And I also have some concerns that Deebo Samuel is pretty legit on the goal line as well. The usage for Deebo could really cap the upside for both of the Commanders running backs in this offense. So until we know what to expect, I will favor Ekeler overall in this backfield. However, I think his upside is capped. He's more of a floor play, just like Jaylen Warren and Sampson. You're probably not getting more than 10 points. I will probably pass on both Commanders running backs in my lineup in week 1. At 34, I have Tank Bigsby versus the Panthers, and like I mentioned with Etienne, the matchup against Carolina was the best in the NFL last year. It's definitely an elite spot to be chasing, but they're probably a little more improved than they were last year, and Bigsby still does not catch passes. So I think in week 1, they want to give Etienne a shot at workhorse potential. While I do think Bigsby will factor in, I don't trust him to score a touchdown, and I also do not trust him to catch a single reception in this backfield. So no thanks with Bigsby. I'd like to see the Jags touch split before I endorse him. And while he might be a great start next week, if he's more involved than I expect, this week I want to be favoring Etienne in the passing game. I think he has a safer floor. So no thanks with Bigsby at RB34, though. He is somewhat relevant. And then the last starting running back I think does have some relevance would be Nick Chubb at the Rams. Mixon is clearly out for a while, if not the entire season. However, to trust Nick Chubb, oh God, that really scares me. I think there is no safe bet here in the Texans' backfield. Nick Chubb could look completely washed. He could really struggle to create separation, and I could literally see him average less than 3.5 yards per carry all year long. I have no desire to trust the ceiling on Nick Chubb. He's hyper touchdown dependent, and although he probably gets one, he could score a touchdown and still struggle to put up more than 9 points. So I'm not going to start him. I think it's way too risky, and with no pass catching ability at all, I do have some concerns that Woody Marks is actually the better acquisition in fantasy this year. In full PPR, I would not even consider starting Nick Chubb. I actually think Woody Marks is a very sneaky bench stash given the risk level with Nick Chubb. But week 1, I think he's their guy. We'll see how long it lasts. I'm not going to start him, though, on the road at the Rams. Next up, I think only in very deep formats would you even consider starting these players, but I do think they have a relevant role in week 1. For Justice Hill, last year in week 1, Derrick Henry only had 13 carries and 2 targets. They like to ease him in the first game of the year. Meanwhile, in week 1 against Kansas City last season, Justice Hill had 1 carry and 8 targets. He had 6 catches for 55 total yards. In full PPR, there is some sneaky value for Justice Hill here. So I'm not telling you to start him, but in full PPR, I could see him go over 10 points. I expect him to factor in and catch at least 4 or 5 catches in this matchup. But with Keaton Mitchell factoring in, there's also a big red flag that it's a 3-man committee, and I would not be starting Justice Hill. But in week 1, I do think he has some value. I think in terms of player projections, the higher on Justice Hill catches is actually pretty tempting in week 1. I do expect him to have some type of role as they ease in Derrick Henry into the season. Next up at 37, I'm worried to fully trust Jordan Mason, but he could be the goal line running back. There's a chance he's more valuable than Aaron Jones, but until I see it in the Vikings offense, I'm not going to start him. I'm going to pass on Mason. He's a great bench stash, but this week, he's just my RB37. I'm not going to start him in week 1. At 38, I'm also not going to start Kaleb Johnson at the Jets. I fully expect Jaylen Warren to keep him off the field for a while, and until we see a reliable goal line role for Kaleb, I don't think he has much value at all in this Steelers backfield. So no thank you. I'll keep him on the bench, but I'm not going to start him. And then another player I'll keep keep on the bench but not going to start is Ollie Gordon of the Dolphins at the Colts. There's a chance that he's actually the starting running back if Achane does remain questionable and doesn't play this week. I do think Gordon is a sneaky touchdown vulture, and there's a chance he's one of the most valuable handcuffs to own in all of fantasy this year. So the number 2 job is clearly his, as Jalen Wright is not available to start the season. Ollie Gordon needs to be on your roster. If he's on the waiver wire, you have to pick him up. However, I would not start him. I would expect Achane to still be the only guy with value in this backfield in week 1. But Braelon Allen, I think, is in the same camp as guys like Gordon and Bigsby. I don't know what to expect from the Jets backfield week 1, so I'm not going to trust him at all. But if the hype is legit, if he's actually more involved than we think, he may be a weekly flex consideration. There's a chance he cracks the top 30 pretty consistently in the rankings, but week 1, I'm not going to trust him at RB 40, no effing chance. But I might be way too low on him. There's a chance he's actually really valuable right out the gate. At 41, I also think Jerome Ford is a sneaky value as well. I don't fully believe that Dylan Sampson has this backfield all to himself, and Jerome Ford is the veteran in the Cleveland backfield. There's a chance they trust him a bit more, especially in the passing game. I do think he has a role, but I'm not going to start him. I just want to see what happens in Cleveland. Maybe next week he does crack my top 30 in the rankings. I doubt it. I think it'll be Sampson's job, but Ford is somewhat relevant to start the season, as Judkins is not on the team. Outside the top 41, though, there is no chance in hell I'm starting these players. I'm just going to rip through the top 50 just to mention them. At 42, 43, I have Javonte Williams and Miles Sanders, the 2 Cowboys starting running backs, and I have no confidence in Javonte keeping the job, but week 1, I think he has more passing volume than Sanders, and I do think this job is completely up for grabs. If you told me it's Miles Sanders' job, I wouldn't be that surprised, but I also don't think either player scores a touchdown, and against the Eagles, a bottom 2 matchup, there is no effing chance I'm starting a Cowboys running back. So just wait and see. At some point, I do think Jaden Blue will steal the job from both of them, but in the beginning of the year, I do think the veterans have the pole position in this backfield. So no thanks. I'm not trusting either of them, but if you want to roster them, be my guest. And then at 44, I have Charbonnet. He's pretty irrelevant once Walker's healthy. You have to have him on the bench, but he's pretty unstartable as long as K9 is available. At 45, Ray Davis could have some sneaky touchdown vulture value this year, but in week 1, I'm going to trust James Cook off the contract extension. I don't think Ray Davis will be stealing that many touchdowns right out the gate, but this game could be a shootout. There is some upside for Ray Davis. I'm not going to start him though. At 46, I'm also not going to start Cam Scatterboo. I want to wait and see what his role is in the Giants offense, but if you told me he steals the job from Tracy by Halloween, I would not be that surprised. I do think he has the higher upside overall in this backfield throughout the year. 47, I want to be keeping an eye on Woody Marks. I think he's actually a very valuable bench stash, especially in a full PPR league. He caught 216 catches in college, and there's a chance that with Chubb's lack of usage in the passing game, he does average like 5 targets per game from Stroud, as long as Mixon is unavailable. So if Mixon doesn't play at all this year, Woody Marks might be the more valuable asset in the Texans backfield. Chubb scares the shit out of me, but to trust this low drafted rookie week 1 is definitely not a safe bet. I want him on the bench, but I need to see what happens in this backfield. He may vault up the rankings. Keep an eye on Woody Marks, a very sneaky value overall. But 48, I have Kareem Hunt versus the Chargers. Needs a touchdown to be relevant. And week 1, I'll trust Pacheco. But still, there's a chance that Kareem Hunt is like much more valuable than I would give him credit for. At 48, I might be ranking him kind of like 10 spots too low. There's a chance he does have value. At 49, though, I got Rhamondre Stevenson versus Las Vegas. He's questionable with an undisclosed injury. He may not play. And personally, I'm fully committed to TreVeyon Henderson this season, so no thank you at all with Rhamondre. He strictly has handcuff value as a bench stash, but the last player I will rank in week 1 is Will Shipley versus Dallas, and obviously you cannot start him. Saquon is going to dominate, but this game has blowout potential, and it's possible that they bench Saquon in the 4th quarter if the score is out of hand. I could see some sneaky garbage time usage for Will Shipley if he finds his way into the end zone. I wouldn't be that surprised. So he's worthless, not a good start, but in terms of DFS, I do think there's a chance he has some relevance. So those are my top 50 running back rankings this week at the position. I think you have to start anyone in the top 15, honestly. Based on where you drafted him, there is no chance you're benching the top 15. I think once you get to Kyren Williams, though, given the matchup is a red flag, that's where I'm pumping the brakes a little bit. But all the players in the top 20, I think, are guaranteed in your lineup. You have to start 2 running backs every week, so no chance you're benching them. But once we hit Breece Hall, I kind of want to see what this Jets backfield looks like before I fully endorse him. And that's kind of the case with every single player in my flex territory. I think Breece Hall through Isiah Pacheco are the guys that are in the mix for whether or not you're starting him at flex or benching them for a high-end wide receiver this week. So pump the brakes a little bit. We'll have a little more clarity after week 1. But I think once you hit Jaylen Warren at 29 and Dylan Sampson, that's where the touchdown upside kind of goes out the door, and you're kind of just betting on floor plays. Without a touchdown, you will not get 10-plus points from any running back outside the top 28. So that's where I'm probably benching everyone, but I also think players like Justice Hill through Jerome Ford in the top 41 have some level of value, and there is a chance that maybe they do factor in more than we expect. But outside the top 41, no effing chance I'm starting them. Starting with Javonte at 42, those guys need to be on the bench, if not remain on the waiver wire. So that's it for me in this video. If you still have any questions, let me know in the comment section down below, and I will see you in the next video. I'll give you wide receiver rankings tomorrow. If you don't want to miss out, hit that subscribe button for more content. If you made it this far in the video, hit the like button as well, and I will see you next time. My name's Adam Riancho, and thank you for watching Nice and Blunt.